So it started off with the headaches, vomiting, sensitivity to light. But obviously my hearing was very, very sensitive. So any sort of loud sounds, I think everyone around me was really whispering. Everything was very, very overwhelming. And that would sort of trigger further migraines, which trigger the vomiting, which when you vomit will increase your intracranial pressure. So it was this awful cycle. It's quite a difficult one because it's something very isolating, especially young people. You don't hear of many young people who have had a stroke.
A stroke, or brain attack, is a medical emergency where blood flow to part of the brain is blocked or a blood vessel bursts, causing brain cells to die from lack of oxygen and nutrients. This can lead to potential brain damage, disability, or death. Incidence rates are rising, especially in younger age groups. Young stroke survivors face long-term impacts like disability, cognitive decline, and depression, with a high risk of reoccurrence.
You wouldn't think at the age of 22, 23 that health would be a priority. In fact, you probably think you're invincible, the world at your doorstep. That is why this story, Arianne's story, is very, very important. And with stroke on the rise in young people, we mustn't miss what she has to say. Arianne, when we look at life stories, generally we think life stories. But you're only 24, and this only happened to you a couple of years ago. So give us a little bit of insight as to how this all started, because you say it's headaches. A lot of us have headaches on a day-to-day basis, yes. But this was a headache with a twist.
It was, yeah. It was just over a year ago now. I think it was October 7th last year. So quite literally just hit the anniversary last month. And, living my normal 23-year-old life, I had finished university. I decided, since I studied accounting, I was going to take a year out to do my final accounting exams so I could be ACCA certified. So I dedicated a year out, was studying full-time, living at home with mum and dad, the typical Gibraltarian life. And the year was already somewhat difficult because I'd had a bike accident in August, which left me bedbound for a good couple of days. I really injured my back, so I was trying to get back into fitness, but pretty much that summer in August particularly was quite rough. But I carried on pushing through. I really didn't want to miss the exams, which I had scheduled in September, so I carried on studying. And leading up to the exams, I remember every evening, it was sort of like clockwork. It was very, very bizarre. At around 8:30, I would end up with this headache. I'd be eating dinner with mum, dad, brother, and at around 8:30, really bad headache. And I thought, it's probably because I've been studying really, really hard. I've got these exams coming up, the normal sort of thing. Stressed, exams, looking at a laptop all day. So I would be going to bed really, really early, to be completely honest with you. Around 10 o'clock, I would be tucked in bed to try and rest up, and then the morning would come round and I would be absolutely fine, ready to study for the next day. So I did my exams, I think it was the following week or maybe 2 weeks later. I did my exam and the headaches continued. I think about 3 days in, my mum kind of told me to say, Arianne, you've been getting headaches a lot recently. Maybe you should get checked out. And I said, yeah, no, I think I'm going to make an appointment. So I did. I made an appointment to get checked out. Didn't quite make it to the appointment, to be completely honest with you, because that following weekend, on the Saturday morning, I went into town, as you do, paseíto. And I was sat down in my wines having a coffee and I was thinking, oh my God, my jaw is really, really hurting, which was, typical. I'm really stressed. I've probably been grinding my teeth at night. So that was the sort of second step, jaw pain, and it was really, really bizarre. So I'm sat at my wine. I ended up taking a Nurofen just to help with the pain a little bit and carried on with my day. And that following morning, I then started with a really, really bad headache. But you know, I frequently get, maybe not frequently actually, sorry, that's the wrong term. I occasionally get migraines, especially kind of around my menstrual cycle. It always kind of, at least once a month, I'll get a migraine. The typical for me is with some visual disturbances, maybe a couple of hours, at most 4 hours. I'll go to bed, you know, get in a dark room, and then I'll be a-okay and fine to continue with my day. But this was different. It was something which was kind of developing in the background for a good while. And as time progressed, it didn't get better. It got worse and worse and worse. So I ended up the full Sunday, I was in bed, just in a dark room, cold compress, the things you normally do when you have a migraine. So I thought, well, I'll try to sleep it off. You know, as you do, when you have a migraine, you sleep it off, get better and carry on as normal. So I did that. The whole Sunday I was in bed, Sunday night in bed, and then around Sunday at maybe 5, 6 a.m, I woke up because of the pain. It was really, really bad at this point. And then I started with vomiting as well, which for me, I never vomit when I get a migraine. It's never been one of the symptoms. For me, it's very much visual disturbances and, you know, just general headache. So this was new. But at the time there was a bug going round, you know, it was, what was it, around October time, you know, school had sort of just started, everything was doing the rounds. And, you know, everyone was telling me, yep, this bug is doing the rounds in Jib. So, you know, everyone kind of told me, oh, you've just been really unlucky. You've got a migraine. You've probably got this bug as well. Things you expect. No, you don't expect something so serious right off the bat. So I spent my Monday with this really awful headache, vomiting as well. Everything was kind of just progressing very quickly. And my mum was at work at the time, but I had already told my dad that I really wasn't feeling well. So I was trying to sleep it off all day. And my mum was quite, I think she knew, you know, mother's instinct.
Yeah.
She knew in her heart something was wrong. For me, it hadn't dawned on me yet that something was wrong, pero bueno. So I kind of spent the rest of the day. My mum ended up coming home from work around 6 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock. I'm not 100% sure. Because she, from my dad, not heard I was getting worse and worse. By the hour, the vomiting was getting increasingly frequent. I couldn't even lie on bed because when I lied down, it just increased the pressure, which made the headache so much worse. So by the time 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock came around, I was quite literally just sprawled on the bathroom floor because they were cold tiles and I was burning, you know, sitting up every 5-10 minutes because I just didn't stop vomiting. And at that point, my mum was, you know, asking, and my brother was asking me, he's like, well, what do you think we should do? Do you want to go down to A&E? So I said, yeah, I think I'm going to go down to A&E. This isn't like me. This is really, really bad. So we went down to A&E around 7 o'clock. And I got seen not too long later. I think I was waiting about an hour, considering A&E, it's not too bad. But as I mentioned, I was vomiting. I was quite literally in A&E with a little bucket because I didn't stop vomiting. I got seen and the doctor, as you'd expect, would say, you've just got a really, really bad migraine, which was what I was expecting, what my mom was expecting, what any rational human being would expect. So obviously they gave me something to settle the stomach a little bit so I could take some migraine medication and be sent on my way. So I was kept under observation for a while to make sure that the migraine, I think it was sumatriptan, that it stayed down. And I was sent home. But the doctor mentioned, if you go home and you wake up a couple of hours later and you start feeling worse, come back down to A&E because that's a reason for us to be concerned. So, you know, everyone, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So it did settle. I didn't carry on with vomiting. So I went home at around midnight. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't even sleep. I was still in a lot of pain. I couldn't manage sleeping. I really tried. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I went up to mum and dad and I said, I cannot sleep, this is getting worse. And I had started with vomiting again. So we went back down to A&E for the second time now. And I was kept there overnight because the CT scanner in the hospital at the time was broken. So, you know, as the night progressed, all of these different nurses and doctors had seen me just progressively getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I don't like taking Panadol at all. I'm one of those people who, if I can avoid it, I will. But this whole night I was on morphine with the oxygen mask on because of the pain I was in. I kind of had my sunglasses on, a little hoodie.
Excruciating by this point.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And, you know, I was talking because I was trying to explain what was going on, but this was the bare minimum yes, no, the absolute bare minimum. So mum and dad were doing the majority of the talking for me. Obviously, you can imagine with such a bad headache, I was struggling to think. So, all these nurses and doctors saw me throughout the night saying, yeah, come the morning, you'll get a CT scan done because this is quite abnormal. But, the CT scanner in the hospital is broken, so we're having to send all of GHA's patients to GibMed. So by the time the morning comes around, obviously new doctors come in, and there were a lot of cases which needed to be seen by the CT scanner. And it was put down that I was just having a hormonal migraine. So in the end, I didn't get the CT scan done by the hospital, which, in a case like that where you have so many patients, you can partially understand, But all of the nurses and doctors who had seen me throughout the night thought something is quite wrong. And I distinctly, I don't remember her name, sadly, but one nurse in particular, before I left, really looked me in the eyes and told me, if you feel worse, come back down. Don't feel embarrassed. And she said this about 3 times, so it really, really stuck with me. She said, don't feel embarrassed to come down. If you need A&E, you come back down to A&E. And it stuck with me. Obviously, mum being mum, I'm very, very lucky to have the parents, which I do. Mum had already arranged a private CT scan. I'm very lucky to have private medical insurance because of my mum. So she knew something was really, really wrong. So she decided to take it into her own hands, and she took me privately. So I got seen almost immediately, got the CT scan done. And then from there, I didn't really know what to do. Obviously, I'd been discharged from A&E. So my, mum and dad asked, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to A&E? I was walking through town with a bucket, sunglasses, my hoodie up. I looked like a drug dealer. It was awful. I was a sight. It was so, so bad. Obviously, this was now at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was really bright and sunny, which made it so much worse. So I decided, okay, well, they've discharged me, so let's just go home. I just didn't want to be out in the sun. It was, I couldn't think properly. It was too much. So, went back up home, made it up the few steps to my house, got the lift up to my parents' floor, opened the door. I didn't even make it to the sofa, which is about 2 steps in. I collapsed there on the floor, started vomiting all over again. Obviously, the morphine which they had given me was wearing off. So all of a sudden, everything started kicking in all over again. The headache got so much worse, the vomiting. I was struggling to stand. I couldn't even make it to sit down on the sofa. I was sat on the floor with my back kind of on the footrest of the sofa. So, mum and dad immediately were like, okay, no, something is really, really wrong. We're going back down to A&E. So he took me back down, was waiting a while, eventually got admitted again. And, they saw me in triage. That one of the same doctors which saw me last night was kind of gobsmacked. He's like, why are you still here? What's going on? So immediately that same doctor started, checking me out. And within a couple of hours, because, CT scan takes a good few hours. So between going up, coming down.
So they had to get the results at this point.
Yeah, so we were still waiting for the results. So maybe around 4 hours since I got the CT scan done. I had been just admitted to A&E, and the private doctor was calling my mobile. I obviously wasn't looking at my phone. So he ended up calling my mum, in which obviously I'm 18 years old, so I needed to give, over 18 years old, sorry, had to give kind of verbal confirmation that he could tell my mum the results. So I remember my mum, it's all very, very blurry, but I remember my mum just telling me, just tell the doctor yes for your results. I'm like, okay, mum. So I just kind of get the phone and say, yes, tell her, and give it off to my mum. Her face really, really serious all of a sudden, and she looks at me kind of,
in shock.
In absolute shock, yeah, and tells me, you've got clots in your brain. And she runs off to find a doctor, very action. Yeah. I know my mum, this is what, she sees a problem and she's like, okay, this is the solution. So she goes to run to find the doctor. I'm just kind of sat there thinking, what?
What does this mean?
What? I know nothing about strokes, nothing about clots, no knowledge whatsoever. And I really love a good medical drama, but I hadn't gotten to any of those episodes yet. So I knew absolutely nothing. And obviously my dad was at my bedside. So I kind of looked at him and said, am I gonna die? Because I was expecting, alarm bells to start ringing, someone to roll me into a theatre to kind of operate. I know my expectations were not quite what was gonna happen, no. But it was, that for me, that moment was, I think, the scariest moment. And my symptoms hadn't fully yet developed. This was you know, the beginning of the storm, to be completely honest with you, the headache, the vomiting, it was all the start. But at that point, my body was so weak, I couldn't even walk. Going into A&E that third time, I collapsed on the way in. My body just couldn't take it.
So this must have been very shocking, because we never expect a young person, you were 22 at the time.
I was 23 at the time.
23 at the time, to have a stroke. There are two types of stroke. One is a hemorrhage, where big bleed on the brain, and the other is clots that are kind of like blocking signals and in your brain.
Yes, but the type I had is actually quite bizarre, because
you had a very peculiar type.
Yes, it's very odd. So the type of stroke which you said, which is the blockage, is normally when oxygen, when the blockage is kind of going to the brain. So the blood is blocked from entering the brain, which prevents oxygen from reaching the brain. In my case, it was the opposite. It was the venous system which was blocked. So all of the blood was rushing up, but it wasn't draining. So there was too much blood in my head. So
that was the pressure, hence
exactly,
the
that was absolutely, yeah. So all of that intracranial pressure, is what was causing the headache. And then, you know, my symptoms kind of progressed from there, but it was all very sort of sensory. All of my senses were affected because of that pressure in my head.
Did they tell you what could have caused this?
They did, yeah. There were a couple of, you know, it's a very bizarre situation to be in. So immediately I sort of thought it was the bike accident, which I had. You know, I was bedbound for a good few weeks. You know, I wasn't as active because I was really stressed, studying really hard, so maybe I should have been walking a little bit more. So my instinct was kind of, this must have been the bike accident. But the doctors started asking me, you know, all these probing questions, and it came to light that I was on the contraceptive pill, particularly the combined contraceptive pill, which has both estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen, in case ladies aren't aware, increases the likelihood of having not just a stroke, but any sort of clotting.
Thrombosis, yeah.
Exactly. So when you get put on the pill, doctors are supposed to ask you if you suffer from migraines with aura. Aura meaning any sort of visual disturbances, that sort of thing. I do. So when they asked me, I genuinely don't remember, because I can't even remember how old I was at the time. But I don't recall being asked this, so they kind of put me on the standard, you know, as they do with every sort of woman, the combined contraceptive pill, there you go, and on your way, pretty much. So, yes, I carried on as normal, and really the risk is within the first year that you're put on the pill, so it's very random that this happened maybe 3 or 4 years in. So it very peculiar, it seems.
It is very peculiar,
yes.
And it's very rare, because at the end of the day, the pill works well for many hundreds and thousands of women without an issue. But what is so important in your message is that there's always a percentage and always a risk.
Yes.
And that's why we need to educate ourselves and inform ourselves like this about being asked with migraine. You would ordinarily never have been put on that pill. Now, the effects and the damage to your brain when that happened, how did that progress? Because you were put straight away on medication to control it.
I was, yeah. Things progressed
things got very
quickly.
weird.
Yes, and so blood thinners take a couple of days to enter the bloodstream properly, so it's very much a blur for me. Probably my parents will recall this story much better than I will, because I was on morphine at the time, wasn't even aware of what time of day it was. It was very confusing. For me, it feels like one really long day, but according to my parents, it was maybe 3 or 4 days. So, you know, once I got my results in A&E, I was taken into the ward, and then from the ward, they moved me into the ITU. They started me on 2 different types of blood thinners. Clexane injections, which enter the bloodstream a lot quicker, and warfarin, which is the kind of pills which, if some people know of anyone who takes blood thinners, it's probably warfarin. So they started me on those 2 different types of blood thinners, but obviously it took a while to have effect, so the intracranial pressure was still increasing at the time. So it started off with the headaches, vomiting, you know, sensitivity to light. But obviously my hearing was very sensitive, so any sort of loud sounds, I think everyone around me was really whispering.
So it affected your hearing?
It did. Everything was very overwhelming. And that would sort of trigger further migraines, which triggered the vomiting, which when you vomit will increase your intracranial pressure. So it was this awful cycle. It was absolute chaos.
Your eyesight?
My eyesight was one of them. I think that was probably the most frustrating one, to be completely honest. Aside from the sensitivity to light, I was in the ITU on one of the side rooms, everything pitch black. It was a cave. But a couple of days in, I had a nap, I woke up, and I opened my eyes and I was like, wait, I can't see. Like, no, I can see, but I can't see. This is really
You can't
confusing.
see properly. You're blurred.
Yeah, not blurred, but I had double vision. For me, I didn't even clock it at the time because it was just so overwhelming. It was, I opened my eyes and it felt like, wait, something's wrong. Like, I can't see, but, I can see you, but you're skewed. It was very, very bizarre. So, immediately kind of called the doctor, and I did have double vision, and it was because of the nerve. There's a nerve kind of in here.
Right.
I think it was called fourth nerve palsy. So because of the intracranial pressure, my nerve wasn't working properly, which means that my eyes weren't really working together. So they took me down to the opticians to get kind of corrective glasses. So they kind of put a stick on the inside of the lens of my right eye, which kind of brought my eyesight to get aligned. But it was very, very, very weird.
Very frustrating.
And it lasted a few months as well, which, as you can imagine, I was still trying to study for my exams.
Right. So that must have been really challenging.
It was really challenging.
The most peculiar one of all, your sense of smell.
Oh, my sense of smell and taste. Opposite of COVID. COVID, you don't taste or smell anything. No, this was kind of hyper-realistic superpowers.
This is incredible.
Unreal. It was so, so weird. The cleaner would kind of come in the morning, as you do. The smell of the cleaning products would get me to start vomiting. I think I survived off, when I did start eating, because I just didn't eat for a good while, I was eating fruits. Well, actually one of the few things which I could stomach. But apart from that, kind of dry cereal, bread, potatoes, the plainest, and I love food, the plainest possible thing. But it's not sustainable. I needed to be getting something else. I needed to be eating something substantial. And my dad, the patience of a saint, oh my Lord, my dad, he was making this really nice food at home, bringing it into the ITU, and he made rosto one day. I love rosto. I love rosto. Gibraltarian, of course. He made the rosto, heated it up, and he thought, why not try it? He brought the food in, and I started vomiting. I was like, oh my God, I want to eat this, but I cannot. I really, really cannot. The smell makes me so sick. I cannot bear this. So, he took it out of the room, because the steam was making me more sick. Took it out of the room, and maybe an hour later said, well, why don't we let's try something. I was like, okay, sure. Let's try something. Okay. My dad heated up the food again. He stood outside the room where I was in because it had the door which closed, and it had like a double door. So he went like in between the two rooms. So I was in one room, he was in the small little room right before opening the door. So he stood there with the plate of rosto. He put on a piece of pasta on the fork, and he said, okay, cover your nose. So I was like that. And he came running into the room and just put it in my mouth, and he ran back out.
Basically feeding you like a baby now.
Feeding me like a baby.
Just swallow,
so I wouldn't smell anything. It was like, just get something, like eat something. So, and he was like that for about 3 hours, just to eat a small plate of rosto.
I just want to get to where you are today, because it's been a long road of recovery. You've had to take a lot of medication. All these weird things have happened to you. Your brain is damaged. You said it's now, what did they say, the brain of a...
Oh, the veins of like a 60-year-old, something like that.
Something like that. That's frightening to hear.
Yes.
Very frightening to hear. So your life has had to change.
Yeah, no, it has.
So what about your mental health, Arianne?
Oh my God, my mental health.
You're a young person.
I am a young person. Yes, it's been quite the journey for my mental health, to be honest. It's quite a difficult one because it's something very isolating, especially young people. You don't hear of many young people who have had a stroke. So I started reaching out, actually works here, John Shepherd, because I saw, when I searched stroke Gibraltar on Google, one of the first things I saw was one of his posts. So I reached out to him and asked, okay, well, you've had a stroke, like how can I get a little bit more involved? And I didn't immediately tell him that I'd had a stroke. It was something really weird. He was doing, I think, 10 kilometers walking, something like a walking challenge. So I just appeared and I just started walking. I was like, you know what? Yeah, this feels right. It feels right to be here. But I hadn't mentioned anything yet. Eventually, I did reach out again, and we met here in the GBC building, and we had a nice conversation, and I told him I'd had a stroke, and, initial reaction, as everyone does, like, what? You're so young. So that first interaction with someone who had had a stroke was, for me, it was such a relief, which sounds very awful saying it out loud, but it was a relief to have someone to relate to. And then from there, the group kind of grew because we made like an informal association where we could reach out to each other. You know, I meet with Justina Tripol occasionally, so we can just kind of vent because no one really understands the symptoms. All of a sudden, you know, I'll be absolutely fine at work and then I've got a pounding headache. I cannot think clearly. All of a sudden, I can't multitask anymore, which is really frustrating. So to have someone who relates, I feel, is so important. But obviously those first initial months, as much as someone tries to relate to me, it's impossible.
Yeah, that is such an important message
absolutely.
in this story.
Yes.
That just because you're young, it doesn't mean that you can't have a stroke. In fact, it's statistically now, it's known that the strokes in young people is on the rise,
Yes,
which
it
is
is.
very concerning. So we have to stop thinking now that it's just
Absolutely,
about,
yes.
it only happens to a certain section
There should
of
be
our
a bit more
community.
education about it because, you know, I was in the hospital and had no idea, not a single clue on what a stroke, knew what a stroke was, but I had no idea what happened afterwards. I had no idea what blood thinners were until the hematology clinic came in to see me. I had not a clue.